Well, this week, one of the smaller British parties takes up 2 seats in the European Parliament for the first time. The British National Party, regularly described as fascist, now has many local councillors, 1 member of the London Assembly and 2 MEPs, one of whom is its leader, Nick Griffin, who joins me now.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, you arrive at the European Parliament this week, not an institution that you would like to see sustained, or you'd certainly like to see Britain being a member of, and you haven't been able to kind of create a party of a group of far-right parties. So what do you hope to achieve there?
Well, the MEPs who go from Britain, certainly from the main parties, Tory, Liberal, Labour, they're almost all of them Europhiles. They wouldn't recognise a threat to British interests if it really stood up and shouted at them in the face. So we want to be there primarily as whistleblowers, because we are very suspicious of the drive for federal, towards a federal Europe. We want to stand up for British interests.
Of course, UKIP have been, no one would describe them as Europhile. I just wonder, I mean, you now get quite a lot of taxpayers' money because of this. Do you accept that it's happened really not because more and more people were voting for you, but because people were not voting for other parties, above all the Labour Party, they just stayed at home?
There's an element of truth to that, but our vote did go up from 800,000 to nearly 1 million, so it went up on a much lower turnout. But obviously there's a huge amount of discontent with the old political parties, which when you look what they've done to the country is justified. Now,
you're described regularly as being a fascist. So let's start by looking at what you think now about British Asians and black British people. You've said that they may be legally British, but they're not ethnically British.
Yeah,
given that we all live under the rule of law, what practical difference would that make?
Well, I must start by saying I'm not a fascist. That's a smear that comes from the far left. Fascism is about using political violence. It's about worshipping a large state and saying the state should impose its will on people. Well, so we're not fascists.
You have talked about political violence in the past.
I've talked about self-defence when we've been attacked, but
fists and boots, you said.
Yeah, when we've been attacked, yes. But the fact is that we decommissioned those attitudes about 10 years ago. There is now an organised mob called the United Against Fascism, which is backed by all the main parties. It's backed, including by people by David Cameron. It regularly uses violence against our people, and people like Cameron will not condemn it. Now, that's fascism.
So what about a black or Asian British person watching this programme who wants to know what you would like to happen to them and their families eventually? Well,
a significant number of them vote for us, as a matter of fact, because they came to Britain primarily because they wanted to come to a British Britain. They didn't want to come to part of the Third World or something becoming an Islamic state. So our position with them is that they're here if they've bought into our ways and values, say like Trevor McDonald. If they're here legally, they're paying into our system, they don't want to change our country into something else, we've got no problem with them whatsoever.
I hear, and maybe this is wrong, that, for instance, the British National Party does not support the England football team when there are black players on the pitch. Is that true?
That's entirely wrong. That dates back to a comment on the website about 8 years ago. Nothing to do with our position now.
And what about Kelly Holmes? Because one of your members suggested that she wasn't fully British.
Yeah, well, civically, all these people, if they come here legally, they bought into our ways, they're civically British. But to point out that, for instance, Trevor McDonald is not Welsh or English, is not to do him down and say he's not British. If Trevor McDonald's English, then the English are nothing, and that's a racist position. It's wrong.
So why put the word civic in?
To make the point where it's the liberal elite who say, for instance, that we have to fill in the census form. I have to describe myself as white British. I'm not white, I'm English.
But if you say,
I'm not allowed to say that.
If you say somebody is civically British, you're saying they're not properly British, aren't you?
No, I'm saying they're not ethnically British. And it's a simple matter of fact that someone such as Kelly Holmes is not Irish, she's not Scottish, English or Welsh. She's a black Briton.
Do you any longer want to see an all-white Britain?
No, it's simply not doable. Nobody out there wants it or will pay for it. We do believe that the Britain we had up until 1948, when the liberal elite decided to change it into something totally different, without a vote or without anything being asked the British people, we think that was wrong, it was undemocratic. But what is done is done. What we need to do now is...
So no repatriation programme?
No repatriation. We've got the same resettlement programme which exists at present, whereby the government makes money available to members of ethnic minorities who want, that's the important word, the crucial word, who want to go back to their lands of ethnic origin. They can get help to do so. But we will put more money into that because Britain is full, overcrowded, and clearly terribly, terribly unstable as a result of this multicultural experiment.
If you, in the past, enthusiastically read Mein Kampf, denied the Holocaust happened, which you did, advocated forms of violence, why should people trust you in any way now? You said these are youthful misjudgments, but it's been a long youth and there were quite some misjudgments.
Let's look at one. I've never said anywhere that I enthusiastically read Mein Kampf. I said I read it when I was 14 and found all but one chapter extremely boring.
But you said that you learned a lot from it at the same time.
No, I didn't. It's typical of the lies that come out and regurgitated, recycled by the press. Most of this stuff comes from a chap who said that his father beat his mother and so on in his biography. His father, Dominic Carman, and George Carman. Most of what he said about me is simply a lie, so please don't repeat them.
Do you abhor fascism? Do you detest fascism?
I detest fascism, and the fascism that scares me, there's several forms. There's the Islamofascism, which is seriously spreading throughout Europe, and particularly in Britain, at the moment, and we need to deal with it. And also the European Union is itself essentially fascist. British values, British traditions are based on Magna Carta, on very ancient rules of English law, and these are being systematically done away with by a European federal superstate, which is very close to fascism.
Let me ask you what may be another media myth. You've got two dogs. What are they called?
Belle and Otto. Anne and Frank is a lie. A wicked, wicked lie.
So, when I read in one of the papers that your dog's called Anne and Frank, that's just untrue?
It's untrue. I can imagine people read that and think, God, this man's either wicked or mad, but it's simply not true.
What about the comment that you made last week about asylum seekers coming across the Mediterranean and the best thing to do would be to sink the boats?
I said that because we've got an unending wave of immigrants coming from Africa as illegals. At present, the position is many of them die on the way over. The liberal way of letting them come is killing thousands of them. And if this continues, Europe will simply sink under a mass of
If you sink the boats
African
instead, they'll die in the sea.
No, I said that what needs to be done as an example is to sink a couple of boats near the shores of Libya, throw them lifeboats so they can paddle back, so they understand they will never get to Europe, because the alternative is accepting that Britain eventually is going to end up like Africa, and the liberal elites have no right to impose or to allow that to happen when the British population do not want it to happen.
We live in a world where, for all sorts of reasons, not least perhaps climate change, people are on the move all over the world. People are desperate to come to Europe, desperate to come here. In the end, what do you do? Do you have machine gun posts in the White Cliffs of Dover? Do you surround the island by barbed wire? What do you do?
I think we need a national debate. What do we do about it? If we're going to allow them to come for a start, I'd say, well, let's start sticking them in Hampstead, in the places where the liberal elite live, instead of poor places like Barking and Barnsley and Manchester, and see how you people like it. That's the very first thing. But I think that sooner or later, we have to say, what are we going to do? There is, particularly from Africa and parts of Asia, there's an endless flood of people who, naturally enough, want to come here to soft-touch Britain. Are we going to let them and let Britain be destroyed, or do we stop them? You tell me.
Well, luckily it's not my job to tell you, but Nick Griffin, thank you very much indeed. Now, my next guest is not only an international heartthrob, but a highly